Hey there, welcome back to another tutorial. In this video, we're going to be creating a scrollable Pokedex. So what you see here is the final product. And if you see, if I scroll down and I click on any Pokemon, it will populate the fields on the left. So we're going to get this data using a Pokemon API with JavaScript. And we're going to style this with CSS and use JavaScript to populate all the information onto our HTML. Alright, so let's begin. Start by creating 3 files, Pokedex.html, CSS, and JavaScript. So doc type, HTML. We're going to add a head tag. So meta charset, UTF-8. And then meta name, viewport. Content, width equals device width. Initial scale, 1.0. Let's also add a title for our page, so Pokedex. And let's also link our style sheet and JavaScript. So link rel style sheet href pokedex.css script source pokedex.js. Alright, so after that, let's work on our body. So we're going to have one content box. So div ID equals content box. And it's going to be that single box you see with our Pokedex. So it's going to be this box here. And we're going to have a left side and a right side. So here, left side is going to be used for displaying the Pokemon info. So div ID equals Pokemon info. And we're going to have an image. So Pokemon image. And we're also going to have a div for the types. So div ID, Pokemon types. And in here, I'm going to add 2 types. So Bulbasaur is grass and poison. So I'm going to add 2 spans and have a style class of type box and grass. So type box is going to be used by all the types, and this grass class is just the background color. So here we're going to put grass, and then we're going to add another span, type box poison, and we're going to put poison. And then after that, we're going to add a div for the Pokemon description. Alright, so that's it for the left side. And on the right side is our list. It's going to be scrollable. So we're going to populate the list of Pokemon names. So here, right side, display Pokemon list. And div ID goes Pokemon list. Alright, so that's it for our HTML. Everything else we're going to use JavaScript to populate. Alright, so now if you open up the folder with your files, just double click on the HTML. And you can see all we have is that grass and poison span, because everything else is a div without any content inside. You're not going to see anything for now, but don't worry, we're going to style everything and then use JavaScript to populate that information. Alright, so for our CSS body, we're going to set the font family to Arial. And then for the content box, let's set a width and height. So width is going to be 500 pixels. Height is going to be 500 pixels, and let's add a border. So 10 pixels, solid, light gray. And let's also round the edges of our border, so it's not sharp corners like a square. So border radius, we're going to round it by 10 pixels. And let's also give a background color to the content box so you can see it. We're going to remove the background color later, so for now we're just adding it so we can see what it looks like. So let's make it green. So we have our content box, the background is green, and it has a light gray border with rounded edges. Alright, so to center it, we're going to do margin 0 auto, and I'm going to add a margin top of 60 pixels so that it pushes down from the top by 60 pixels so that it's not directly touching the top of the page. Alright, so now this is what we have. Let's style the divs for the left side and right side. So let's style the Pokemon info. And it's going to take up half the content box. So the width will be 500 divided by 2, so 250 pixels. The the height is going to be 500 pixels. And let's set the color to cyan so you can see the box. And let's also do the same for Pokemon list. Width 250 pixels, height of 500 pixels. Background color, let's make this one yellow. Alright, so now if I refresh, you can see we have our two divs. Now you might notice that it's stacking on top of each other. We want it to be side by side, so let's add display flex. So over here, I'm going to do display flex. So now if I refresh, you can see we have our two sides right next to each other. So this is going to be our Pokemon info, and this is going to be the Pokemon list. Alright, so let's start working on our JavaScript. So we're going to keep track of a Pokemon count. So I'm going to do 151. You can increase this later if you want, but I'm just going to leave it as 151. And I'm going to create a Pokedex map. And basically the structure is, the key is going to be the numbers from 1 to 151. So it'll look like this, 1. And it's going to have another map as a value. And within there we have a name. So in this case, that'll be Bulbasaur. We're going to have an image, which is some URL, and it's going to be a string. We're going to have a type. So this is going to be an array. So it could be one type or two types. That's why we're using an array. And then finally, we're going to have a description. So this is just a really long string, like so. And then when our page loads, we're going to do window.onload equals function. So I'm going to call a getPokemon function and pass in 1. So 1 is Bulbasaur. So let's create that function here. So function getPokemon. We're going to pass in a number, and we're going to get the URL based on that number. So if we go and check out the API now, just go to pokeapi.co, and if we scroll down, you can see there are many ways to fetch the data. Here's the URL, and you can add the Pokemon name at the end, or you can do it by ID. So here's 1 for Bulbasaur. So if I do it by Pokemon name, I can do Pokemon/Bulbasaur and hit submit, and you can see it'll retrieve the data. And the data is in JSON format. So we're going to be using the number 1 because we're going to be doing a for loop from 1 to 151. So that way we don't need to get all the names of the Pokemon. And you can see there are a lot of fields here. There's abilities, forms, game indices, moves, species, sprites, and all that. Types as well. So we can uncollapse them like so. And these are the keys within that first layer of JSON. So we have abilities, forms, game indices, moves, species, sprites, stats, and types. And yeah, so we're going to get the URL like this. So just copy and paste this. Don't forget the Pokemon slash. So the URL is going to be this and Pokemon slash. And we're going to add num.toString. So in this case, we're passing in 1. It's going to add 1 to this URL. And then we're going to retrieve the data. So let response is equal to fetch URL. And let Pokemon is equal to response.json. And then now let's print it. So console.log Pokemon. And we should expect a JSON format for Bulbasaur. Alright, so if you refresh and you right click inspect and you check the console, you can see res.json is not a function. And the reason is because res is currently no. There's no value in our variable, even though we're calling fetch, and that is because it is a asynchronous function. So with asynchronous functions like fetch, when you call it, it'll say, okay, we're still getting the data, but you can carry on with the rest of your code. Now the problem is the rest of our code depends on this data. So even though we're allowed to carry on with the rest of our code, we're going to get errors because we are waiting for this data. So we need to declare this as await. So it's going to say wait till this function ends, and then we're going to carry on with the rest of our code. And we're going to do the same thing here. And every time you have await in your function, you need to declare the function as async. Okay. And anytime you have a function that calls an async function, that function also has to be async. So now we have this, And if I go back and refresh, you can see we have Bulbasaur's data. So here I can see Bulbasaur's abilities, forms. Let's look at the types. So here we can see types is an array. So at index 0, we have grass, and index 1, we have poison. Okay? So let's start filling our Pokedex over here with this get Pokemon call. So I'm just going to comment this out. And we're going to do let Pokemon name is equal to Pokemon name. And let Pokemon type is equal to Pokemon types. So this is going to return an array. And let Pokemon image is equal to Pokemon. So what is Pokemon image? Let's go check. So the Pokemon image would be sprites here. And you can see there are various sprites. So we're going to do sprites and front default. So it's going to be this URL. So sprites and front default. Okay. And actually, I'm going to copy this URL so you can see what it looks like. And you can see this is the URL and this is the sprite for Bulbasaur. So what I'm going to do is in our HTML, I'm just going to add a source here and put in that sprite for Bulbasaur. So if I refresh, you can see there's Bulbasaur. Okay. We have the name, we have the type, and we have the image. Now we just need the description. So I'm just going to uncomment this again. If I refresh, let's look for the description. So we have name already, we have the types, we have the sprites for image. So the description is going to be in species, and within here we have a URL. So I copy and paste this URL. So within here you can see there's a lot of data, but you can see that there's a field called flavor text, and it seems to be where the information is going to be about the Pokemon. So we're going to get that URL, and again, when we're fetching the URL, we're going to call await on that fetch function. So res equals await fetch Pokemon species and URL, and then we're going to do let Pokemon description equal to await response.json. And then let's also do console.log on Pokemon description. Alright, so now if I refresh and do right click inspect, let's check the console. You can see the first one is the Pokemon object, and the second one is our description. So let's see, there's a flavor text entries. So let's click on this and we get a bunch of these. So I'm going to just choose one of them. I think I'll choose number 9. You can choose any of them you want, and there are different languages. I'll just choose number 9, this one right here. Okay. Alright, so Pokemon description, we're going to reassign it to Pokemon description, flavor text entries, and we're going to choose the 9th one. And let's see, within here, you see at index 9, there's another map, and the key here is flavor text. So it's flavor text entries, index 9, flavor text. Alright, so we have our Pokemon name, type, image, and description. And let's add it to our Pokedex variable. So let's add it to our map. So Pokedex num is equal to a map of name, Pokemon name, image, Pokemon image, types, Pokemon type, and description, Pokemon description. Alright, and over here, let's do console.log Pokedex. So I'm going to comment this out. Alright, so if I right click inspect and I go to console, we should see our Pokedex object. So here we can see name, Bulbasaur, image is that URL. And if I drag this over, let's see if I can expand that a little. You can see we have our types, which is an array of 2, and we have our description. Alright, so let's use a for loop. So for let I equal 0, I less than Pokemon count. Let's do less than or equal to I plus plus. We're going to do await get Pokemon of I. Actually, it should be 1, right? Because there's no Pokemon 0. And let's comment this one out. So for let I equals 1, I less than or equal to 151, I plus plus, we're going to do await get Pokemon. Alright, so if I refresh this and I do right click inspect, you can see we have our 151 Pokemon here. Okay? So within that same for loop, I'm going to create a div element for the names in our Pokemon list, and we're going to populate our Pokemon names in this yellow box. So this is our Pokemon list. So over here, I'm going to say let Pokemon is equal to document.createElement. We're going to create a div. So it's going to do div like this. And I'm going to set the Pokemon ID to I. And the reason I'm setting an ID is so that when I do an on-click on that Pokemon name, I'm going to get the information based on the ID, which is the number in our Pokédex, and I'm going to populate the left side, which is the Pokemon info box. So we're going to add a click handler later, but for now, let's do Pokemon.id equals I, and Pokemon.innerText. This is going to be the name of the Pokemon. So it's going to be I.toString. So we're going to have the number. We're going to add a dot. And we're going to do Pokédex, which is our variable up here. And we're going to do Pokédex of I and get the name. And we're just going to make it uppercase. So to uppercase. So far, what we did is we set an ID. So in this case, for Bulbasaur, it's 1. And then within here, we put in an inner text. So it's Bulbasaur, like this. And let's add a style class. So I'm going to style it and have it be Pokemon class of Pokemon name. Now, we didn't create this in our CSS yet, but we're going to do it later. So let's just have this for now. And then at the end, we're going to do document.getElement by ID, Pokemon list, and we're going to append this Pokemon tag. So over here, we added a class name. So class is equal to Pokemon name. And in this final line, we're taking this div and we're basically putting it within this list. So our for loop is going to go like this and input 151 Pokemon into our list. Alright, so now if I refresh, you can see we have our list of Pokemon being populated with our JavaScript. Now I want to style this so that there's a white box for each name, and I also want to make sure that it doesn't overflow like this. So it needs to stay within the box. So for our CSS, in our Pokemon list, I'm going to do font size just to make it 18, and I'm going to do overflow Y and set it to auto. So this basically means if it flows past our constraint of height 500 pixels, it's just going to make it scrollable. So if I refresh, you can see our font's a little bigger and it is now scrollable within that 500 pixel height, like this. Now let's create a style for our Pokemon name so that it doesn't look like this. We want it to look like this. So I'm going to add a style class, Pokemon name. We're going to add a border of 1 pixel, solid, make it black. Background color is going to be white. And we're going to round the border. So over here, we're going to do border radius, 10 pixels. And we want each Pokemon name to be spaced apart from each other. So we're going to apply a margin of 5 pixels. And within the Pokemon name box, I'm going to add a padding so that the name is not stuck on the edges. So if I go back, and refresh, you can see that the names are kind of just tight within. I'm going to add some padding so that it pushes in the names further in. So we're going to do padding of 5 pixels. So now if I refresh, you can see it pushed the Pokemon name slightly further in. And now we have this nice scrollable Pokemon list. Alright, so now what we need to do is we need to add a click handler. So when I click on a Pokemon name, it's going to populate the data on the left side. Alright, so over here I'm going to do Pokemon.addEventListener. It's going to listen for a click and call an update Pokemon function. So let's define that here. So function update Pokemon document.getElement by ID Pokemon image. We're going to update it to the image of the Pokemon name that we clicked. So Pokemon image.source is going to be Pokedex this.id. So this refers to the name that was clicked, and we're going to get the ID of that name. So again, we set the ID over here. So it's going to be between 1 and 151. So we're going to do Pokedex this.id. We want the image. Okay, so it's going to get this.id and image, which is the URL. So I save and I refresh. You can see if I click on a different Pokemon, the image changes. We want to do the same for our types, and we want to populate the description as well. So before we add the type, we need to clear the previous types. So while not types div, and types div is going to be types div document.getElement by ID Pokemon types. So while not types div dot first child, basically meaning while this div has tags in it, it's going to clear it. So we're going to do types div dot first child dot remove. And then here, we're going to update the type. So let types is equal to Pokedex this.id types. So this is going to return an array, and we're going to do for let I equals 0, I less than types.length, I++. So there could be 1 or 2 types. We're going to create a new span. So let type equal to document.createElement span. So type.inner text. This is going to be types of I, which we retrieved earlier over here. And we're going to do type name dot to uppercase. So if we actually look at this, we can see that types is an array, and within the array at index 0, there's a type map, and within that map is a name. So that's why we do types, index, type, and name. So now let's add a style class. So class list.add type box, and type.class list. We're going to add another one. So it's basically the name of the type. So it's this. And we haven't defined this yet in our CSS, but we will later. But it's basically what I mentioned over here. We have a type box and we have the name of the type. So we have 2 styles. So the first one is just the box itself, and the second one is going to be the background color. So adds the background color and font color. And then our types div is going to append our type. So it's going to append our span. So it's going to take this div and append the span like this. So now if I save and refresh, you can see if I click around, we have fire, and it seems like we're not clearing it. So let's go back and check. This should be while type div. Whoops. While types div still has a tag in it, we're going to remove it. And we change types. You can see it being updated in our HTML. Okay. So let's style this type, and let's also style this box because we want the background to be white. So let's go and do that in our CSS. So let's style the Pokemon image first. So Pokemon info, and it's basically saying Pokemon info, which is this div. We want to style all the image tags within that div, And we're going to set a width to 160 pixels, height to 160 pixels. We're going to set a border of 1 pixel, solid black. Border radius, let's round the edges, so again 10 pixels. And margin top, 20 pixels. And background color, we're going to make it white. So now if I refresh, you can see we have the image here. And let's center this. So within our Pokemon info box, I'm going to do text align center. And if I refresh, you can see it is nicely centered. Alright, now for our Pokemon types, we're going to have Pokemon types. Let's add a margin top of 10 pixels so that it's not directly touching the image. And we're going to have a type box class. Let's add a padding of 3 pixels, margin of 5 pixels. So border is going to be 1 pixel, solid, white. And let's add a border radius of 10 pixels. So now if I refresh, you can see we have our types in the box. So now let's also define the different types and the coloring. So for the coloring, we're going to do, if it were fire, we would make the background color orange and the color to be white. So background color is orange, the font color is white. So I refresh and I click on Charmander, you can see that it reflects here. And I'm going to skip ahead and copy and paste all the colors into the CSS. I'm going to add the code in the description below so you don't have to type each one individually. So I'll be right back. Alright, so I'm back and we have our different colors. So normal, the background color is going to be beige and the font is black. We have fire, orange and white. Grass is green and white. Water is blue and white. And so on. And if I refresh, you can see grass is green, poison is purple. And we can go on and click around. And we have every type. Now all that's left is the description. So the description is pretty simple. So update description. We're going to do document.getElement by ID, Pokemon description, and we're going to set the inner text to Pokedex, this.id, and description. Okay, so I refresh and I click around. You can see we have the description here. And let's also add Bulbasaur's description when we load the page. Because we didn't do it in our HTML, we're going to do it in our JavaScript just for Bulbasaur because Bulbasaur is the first Pokemon. So over here, window.onload, I'm going to do document.getElement by ID, Pokemon description. Inner text is going to be Pokedex of 1, which is Bulbasaur. And we're going to do a description. Alright, so if I go back and I refresh, you can see Pokemon's description for Bulbasaur right over here. Alright, so let's style this box. Alright, so for the Pokemon description box, we're going to add a width of 230 pixels. The height will be 100 pixels. Let's set the background color to white. And the border, let's add 1 pixel, solid black. And let's round the border as well. So border radius is equal to 10 pixels. Alright, so now if I refresh, you can see we have our description here. Now let's add some margin and padding so that it doesn't, stick to the edges, and let's add some margin top so that it pushes down away from the types. So here, I'm going to do margin 0 auto so that it will center the div, and margin top, let's do 10 pixels off the types. Padding, I'm going to add 2 pixels so that the text isn't touching the edges of the box. Let's make the font size a little bigger, so 18 pixels, and I'm going to set an auto overflow of Y so that it is scrollable. Alright, so if I refresh, you can see we have it right in the middle. We have rounded edges and we have a scrollable description box. Alright, so we're pretty much done here. All that remains is adding the background image and the image for this Pokedex just to make it a little nicer. So I'm going to comment out the background color here. We don't need this green. We don't need this sign anymore. We don't need this yellow. And I'm going to use this Pokeball image for our Pokedex. And the images will be in the GitHub repo in the description below. So for our content box, I'm going to set the background to URL, Pokeball JPEG. And I'm going to do no repeat. And I'm going to make the size cover that entire div. And then over here in our body, I'm going to have a background of URL, Pokemon background, JPEG. Again, no repeat. And we're going to make the background size cover. Okay, so it's going to be this background. Alright, so now if I refresh, you can see we have our finished product. We have our fully scrollable Pokedex. And I can click around and you can see we have different information for our Pokemon. Okay. So you can actually add more Pokemon. So to do that, just change this number. So let's say we want 300 Pokemon. And I refresh. It'll take a while, but if I scroll down, we can see we have different Pokemon past 151. And you can continue working on this project if you want. You can add some more stats down here. You can make the Pokedex larger, add more data. You can play around with the API and see what data you can retrieve. So maybe you can add the abilities or the location where you can find the Pokemon. Maybe the other sprites. Maybe you want to add a back sprite or the shiny sprites. So this is all up to you. Alright, so that's it for this tutorial. So if you found this tutorial helpful and you enjoyed this tutorial, please leave a like. Let me know down below in the comments, and please consider subscribing. Let's try to reach that 1,000 subscribers milestone, and I'll see you in the next video.